Thank you, everyone. I'm so pumped by our earlier Latina Equal Pay Day session because we know that the fight for fair pay is not about just one day, but it's every day. And it's about tackling all the obstacles to progress across industries. So that's why I'm really excited to kick off the next segment of our summit, which includes this incredible fireside chat, we hope, on my part, that's coming up right next. And then we have incredible worker-led action sessions and some take action videos. You're going to be hearing from worker organizers across the country on their victories. And everyone's going to be sharing actions about how we can work together in the year ahead to really transform our work and care infrastructures, build economic security for essential women workers and communities of color, and build our power as voters, and help us build resilience from safety and safety from violence as we really emerge from COVID-19. So welcome again. I'm Noreen Farrell from Equal Rights Advocates, and I want you all to close your eyes and imagine a fire crackling, because it is fireside chat time, and I'm so honored that two of my sheroes are joining me. The legendary and inspirational activist and labor leader, Dolores Huerta, who is also the founder and president of the Dolores Huerta Foundation, through which she travels, even as late as this week, across the country, engaging campaigns, influencing legislation that supports equality and defends civil rights. Welcome, Dolores.
Thank you very much. And a lot of that traveling is by Zoom these days.
We're all on a virtual magical carpet tour. I know. But nonetheless, we can feel you through the screen every time. So I'm so happy that you're here. And also joining us is the United States Department of Labor Women's Bureau Director, Wendy Chun-Hoon. And I am so excited that she's here as someone who worked on the nation's first paid family leave law in California 20 years ago. Yes, dating myself. I was among advocates across the country that were so thrilled about this appointment of Wendy, who has deep roots in philanthropy and advocacy, most recently leading Family Values at Work, which is a cherished partner of so many of us. And Family Values Work has won more than 60 new paid leave policies, bringing new rights to, I think it's up to 55 million workers and their loved ones and counting, which is incredible. So welcome, Wendy.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here with you.
All right, Dolores, I'm going to start with you. I'm the daughter of a domestic worker and an SEIU service worker. I went to college on a union paid scholarship. I was a labor organizer and lawyer before I came to Equal Rights Advocates. And I count you among so many who feel so inspired by you in their path in life. And we're here on Latina Equal Pay Day, challenging pay inequities. And we're lifting up the power of essential women workers who are organizing everywhere to change how work is done and how it's valued, especially as we come out of COVID-19. And we're really changing the narrative about exploited women's work to essential women's work. So I want to ask you, why are women so important to the workplace right now? And what's inspiring you about the labor movement today?
Well, women are not only important in the workplace because we know, number one, that they sustain a huge part of our economy by the work that they do. And we're talking about women that work as home care workers, women that work as daycare workers, women that work in the custodial industry, women that work in the hospitality industry, women that work in factories, producing different kinds of goods, women who are school teachers. Every segment of society, we have the worker bees are women, and as we all know, getting women not only to get the living wages that they need, equal pay with men, promotional opportunities as many as men have, And then, of course, we have our women who are working in our state legislatures and our city councils. They're, you might say, the backbone of our government because of all of the work that they do in our Congress, everywhere. So women are, you might say, the spine, you know, and the nervous system of our society when it comes to workers. So we know that women are essential workers. And of course, and we know that we also have many women in leadership in our country that are doing the governance work that needs to be done and doing a very good job of it, you might say, even better than men do in many places. And we have seen that, you know, with the COVID, where you have women who have been out there as governors, that they've done a better job of protecting people in their states, and often as many of the men do, who are still fighting masking and not protecting their constituents the way that they should be. So we women have proven themselves not only as workers, but also as leaders. And we know we need so many more women in leadership, and that's why we have to get the Equal Rights Amendment passed, okay? And so that we can put the law that women are equal to men in the Constitution of the United States, where we do not have it now.
I hear that we need to put our rights on the high shelf, out of the range of those legislative hands that are tearing them down in Texas and other parts of the country. So a shout out to everyone who's working on the Equal Rights Amendment passage. And this is a really good segue talking about great leaders, women leaders in government, Wendy. I hope that you're feeling all of Dolores's positive vibes, because what I want to ask you is, what do you see as, what are we up against? And when I say we, I say women, I'm not talking about the aggregate, because I think, as you have so eloquently spoken about many times, the recognition of the differences of our experience based on our intersectional identity. Can you just share your reflections on what happened to women during COVID-19? What did we learn? What do we have to change for essential women workers in low-paid industries as we go forward?
Well, in thinking about what I'm
going
to say next, I want to first say it is so heartening to be in conversation with you both today. Definitely Shiro's. So, you know, I think what COVID did was really expose the truth that so many of us here today have always known, really, that our economy is propped up. And I think you were saying this, Dolores, it's really been propped up by the undervalued labor of women, and specifically women of color. That, you know, structural racism has led to the overrepresentation of women and workers of color in some really low paying and low quality jobs. And, you know, the COVID moment, it brought all of this sort of crashing in together. And it devastated women of color who, as you said, Dolores, were working in retail and restaurants and hospitality and care jobs. You know, Latinas were particularly hard hit at the start of the pandemic, 23% drop in unemployment because of the fact that they were working in sectors that were most impacted by COVID. You know, Latinas held a disproportionate share of the frontline jobs providing care during COVID. So, you know, on top of low wages and no benefits and frankly, few labor protections, they also faced a higher risk of exposure to COVID. So you know, all of that is to say the pandemic completely intensified the challenges that women already faced. A stifling gender wage gap that's caused in part by a really deeply segregated workforce where women of color dominate, as I was just saying, the low paid jobs and are kind of shut out of the higher wage sectors. And, you know, where, because we take on much more of the home responsibilities, right? The caregiving at home. And because our country has completely lacked paid leave and we've underinvested in childcare and home care, 3 million women are still missing from the labor force, and women of color are bearing the brunt of this. So, you know, as a society, I think we've had blinders on regarding the true costs of the lack of care infrastructure. But, you know, I may try to end on a positive note. Yeah, I think the pandemic has provided this inflection point where more and more folks are really starting to understand the disadvantages of the economic system that we've built And, we know, I mean, all of us here are committed to the fact that we cannot return to an economy that is going to perpetuate gender and racial disparity in employment and economic outcomes. And the Women's Bureau certainly understands that. Latinas are a growing share of the United States workforce. That trend is only going to continue to rise. Women's labor force participation, like I said earlier, down to levels of some 3 decades ago. But, in coming sort of as where we are in the pandemic, Latinas have actually regained a lot of their jobs, but it's not going to be meaningful. And we shouldn't mistake this as recovery in any way. When 1 in 10 Latinas are still, 1 in 10 Latinas who are working, I think it's like 30 hours a week or more, are living below the poverty line. So, all of that to say, we've got to make big investments in paid leave and childcare and elder care. And we need to ensure that these jobs, these essential jobs that hold up the rest of the economy, are being paid family sustaining wages, and that women have the right to organize and join a union, as I'm looking at Dolores and the beautiful quilt behind you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one phrase that I've been coining as I talk about like COVID-19, just to build on what you said, Wendy, is just this devastating clarity that it brought about all of these structures. And Dolores, I'm hoping you can add one more to the list of things we're up against and that we are building power about, because it's going to come up later in the summit. And in recognition of October 10th being the 30th anniversary of Anita Hill's testimony before Congress about her own sexual harassment she experienced. And you and I got to talk to her in conversation last year, which was so wonderful. And we mentioned the farm workers and the janitors and so many essential women of color and immigrant women workers in isolated jobs, including during COVID and especially during COVID, right? We just finished a couple of major cases on that front on behalf of janitors. How do we continue to fight to be free from harassment and assault? And, what opportunities of this moment do you think there are in terms of that issue in our fight, Dolores?
Well, I think the one thing that is good that is happening is that women are losing the fear of coming out. We've seen this recently with the women's soccer team. Who knew? We saw all of the gymnasts. I mean, that I think breaks our heart when we think about all of these young women that were sexually harassed, and yet they were able to overcome that and become Olympic gold medal winners. Oh my God. I mean, talk about inspiration. But I think we have to go further than that. It's not just about having the laws that protect women and giving women, again, that courage to come out. We've got to stop it at the beginning. And, I am right now advocating very, very strongly that we bring ethnic studies into our curriculums in grammar schools, elementary school, okay, at the kindergarten level. We bring in gender studies and women's studies so that little boys will know that they have to respect little girls, that little girls are their equals, that they are not better than little girls. And we have to include all of this because we know that children are not born sexist or misogynist. They're not born racist, right? And that they have this culture they inherit from their families, or the culture that they grow up in. And so we have to, I think, go deeper now and make this part of our education for our children. And so, because I mean, I could say in my family, my mother, we were an equal opportunity mother. My brothers had to learn how to cook and clean and take care of themselves. I never had to cook for my brothers, iron a shirt for them, serve them a plate ever. And in fact, my brothers used to say that I was spoiled, in our family. And we have to start getting this ingrained. And so we can start at the very, very beginning with little girls and little boys and start lending this idea that women are inferior, women are sex objects. Because, when we talk about all of the slayings that have happened in the United States with people of color, like the Mexicans that were killed in El Paso, Texas, because they were Mexicans, and Black folks that have been killed because they're Black, or the Asian women that were killed because they were Asian. All of this comes from ignorance and hatred. And so we got to start attacking this at the very, very root of where it starts, And we know a lot of that started from slavery, because not only were people of color, they used the color to justify the enslavement of people, but it also extended to the domination of women, and children. So I think that we have to start making a really, really big push to make sure that all over the United States of America, that we can start including in our curriculum the whole issue of respecting little girls and women, so we could stop it at the root. This is where we have to go. We have to stop it at the root.
I love that vision, because, we're all fighting for gender justice for all of us. It is men, it is gender nonconforming, gender non-binary, gender expansive, women, girls. And I've seen so much more power in giving everyone an invitation to be allies in this work. And you're going to be hearing later today about the Yabasta SEIU Promotora Center, where these great women are being trained as peer advisors to eradicate sexual harassment in the janitorial industry. And let me tell you, the compadres that have come along through the union to be supportive of this effort is it's very inspirational. I feel like it's changed the momentum of it. So I love that point. Wendy, you bring to the Bureau so much experience on the issue of paid leave, the need for inclusive definitions of family. Thank you for that. Here in California, we have a 2-year bill to include chosen family as our in our family leave policies, which is great. Fingers crossed. What do you see as the role of the Women's Bureau in change that we need as we move forward to modernize what we're thinking about in terms of some of the structure change? And I know one of the superpowers, one of the many superpowers of the Women's Bureau is its ability to collect data. And how can that help shape the policies that are gaining momentum at the federal level and at the state level?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think I want to start by saying I really strongly subscribe to us holding, not just in this conversation that we're having on Latina Equal Pay Day, but really as part of this whole summit that you're hosting, that not just this really narrow sense of pay equity, right, but the whole of what's driving the gender and racial wage and wealth gap. And I think I've just been personally long uncomfortable with the confines of pay equity as being about pay secrecy or banning salary histories or teaching women how to negotiate for better salaries. So I know that this coalition gets that. It's October 21st and Latinas are only now catching up to what white men were paid last year. That's like $30,000 annual median loss in income. That's horrific. So I absolutely know that we have to address, outright discrimination that allows women to be paid less for the same work. And I think that this moment is a really huge opportunity to shift or maybe anchor the conversation in data, as you say. That's one of the Women's Bureau superpowers for sure, but data that really underscore the fact that the gender and racial wage and wealth gap persists because women, especially women of color, are overrepresented in low paid jobs, and they face enormous barriers to entering higher paid jobs. That jobs that are considered women's work are simply just paid less. I mean, we can actually document this. We have documented it, quantified it, the systemic devaluation, and we know that it's women of color in these jobs that are essential to our economy, right? To our success or failure as a country. We talked about earlier, women absolutely face a caregiving penalty because we lack a care infrastructure in this country. So it impacts not just, our current wages, our family's economic security right now in this moment, but absolutely lifetime earning potential and any, hope that we might have of secure retirement. So I think I really come at it, the Women's Bureau comes at it from that perspective and shares that with you all. And I would say, you know, there are a couple other superpowers actually for the Women's Bureau. I mean, data is one of them, but stakeholder engagement, really keeping ourselves accountable, keeping our ear to the ground, keeping our, you know, hearts with the community, staying accountable to the community, but also using the bully pulpit of our secretary and this government who is, you know, 100% committed to what we're talking about today. And another superpower is we actually have grant making authority. So, you know, we're really trying to use all of these superpowers to stay laser focused on the results that we all need to be seeing for women and workers of color, if we're going to call this a recovery, right? So I think, you know, we need to raise wages and improve job quality for the jobs that women, that Latinas are doing. These are the care jobs, right? Where wages that are paid to the workers leave their families in poverty. We got to invest, now is the time to invest in care infrastructure, paid leave, childcare, home care, so that, you know, we stop being penalized for taking care of our families. It's really basic. You know, we need to make sure that women and people of color are getting into these pipelines to good jobs, making sure that women are at the forefront of the investments that we're hoping Congress is going to make in jobs and rebuilding our infrastructure, and, you know, things like pre-apprenticeship programs and registered apprenticeship programs. And again, just, we need to keep moving the needle on getting more women, getting more Latinas into unions, right? That's very powerful. So these are all, you know, things that the administration's committed to, and which we're all hoping Congress is going to help to bring to fruition. And if that happens, you know, it's gonna have a role for everybody: federal, state, local government, unions, employers, workers, activists, philanthropy, everybody who's here with us today, to really ensuring that these investments are actually going to generate greater gender and racial equity.
That's so powerful. I think you said money, stakeholder engagement, and data, the superpowers. I got to try to put that on my list for equal rights advocates. One of the sponsors of this event was the New York Women's Foundation, and I had a great conversation with one of the program officers there about the need for data justice. So I just want to really highlight how incredibly important that is to really fuel all of the work of, you know, worker organizers and advocates in the policy front. So thank you for that. And you know, we've got to close this up because we've got a long day. You've both given us so much information about, you know, your vision. But I just want to give us a parting moment. I think that one goal of this summit is to unite essential women workers across industries, across unions, with advocates, across issues, to build power as we head into 2022. And as I mentioned, the whole next section is devoted to taking action. Can you each in your parting words just share your call to action to really help us radically transform the experience of work, and also just share with our participants how they can stay connected to what you're doing? Dolores, do you want to start?
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness. Yes, we know that we're a pivotal moment in our society, a critical moment in our society. I mentioned, excuse me, the Equal Rights Amendment, which is now, of course, in the U.S. Senate, and all of these really important laws, the Build Back Better America Act that they're trying to pass right now in the U.S. Congress and the U.S. Senate. And yes, a call to action for all women everywhere, that we really have to mobilize right now. We really have to get out there and become organizers. You know, call 5 people that we know or 10 people that we know and tell them it is critical now that you email or call your senator and tell them to vote for these laws that are pending to build the Build Back Better Act, which will provide universal health care, as we know, for all of the working mothers out there, working families that need childcare support. 2 years of community college, expanding our healthcare system to include dental and vision, and so much more. Our social infrastructure. We know we're not having problems because of the so-called filibuster, you know, to get the Equal Rights Amendment passed, et cetera, and to protect our voting rights. And it is so critical right now. We know that women as a whole are voting much more progressive, let's say, than men are right now in our communities of color, especially Black women and brown women. You know, we are voting in more numbers, say, than our male counterparts are, and that we have it right now within our grasp, but we just have to mobilize and call everybody that we know, especially if you have friends and families, please send those emails and those phone calls to the senators to please to vote for this transformational Build Back Better Act right now, the human infrastructure bill that is now in the US Senate. I like to quote Michael Moore on Broadway, who said, when we wake up in the morning, we wash our face, we brush our teeth, and then we call our senator. Okay. So we're at that point right now where we've got to really mobilize, we've got to organize, we've got to take action, because this is right now, we can really improve the lives of women everywhere. And of course, there's the PRO Act also. That is also in the UN Senate right now to pass laws that will make it easier for women to organize into labor unions. All of this right now is within our grasp, thanks to our great President Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and of course, Wendy, who is here with us today. These are people who are governing, and they need our help to make all of this happen. So please, everybody, please, we have to take action right now. It's wonderful that we're at this wonderful summit, but we've got to take away from the summit and put our words into action right now. We have to do it. Si se puede, we can make it happen.
Si se puede. Wendy, you just had your biggest cheerleader. Anything else you want to add about how we can stay connected and some of your vision for calls to action?
I'm so inspired by what you all are launching today. It's a really powerful commitment to each other, but also to the communities that you're carrying with you. So, I want all our young people to be the Dolores Huertas and the Monica Ramirez's. So I think I share a lot of what you just said, Dolores. Like, things don't change without organizing. And, and if our country is in fact poised to make these kinds of significant investments in care infrastructure and job creation, it's really the power of this network that's going to radically transform work. It's in what you're going to need to do next, right? Together, to support, to hold accountability for all who are making decisions about how these investments are going to happen. So, really make sure that this money is going to deliver greater equity, greater gender equity, racial equity, and the Women's Bureau will be here to tap all our superpowers to support you in this. So thank you so much. This has been amazing to be in conversation with you both.
Thank you, Wendy and Dolores, for joining us. We are so looking forward to your continued wisdom and partnership and organizing ahead. Si se puede. And now we're going to kick off the rest of the summit. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
Have fun.
Thank you.